Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Xiaolin Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing episode 5 of Xiaolin Showdown, Shen Yi Bu. And this episode begins by continuing the whole villain of the week formula that we've been seeing for the last few episodes as we're introduced to a new baddie. In this case, an overweight ninja by the name of Tubby Mora. And the reason why he's here is because apparently Jack has put out an ad online to find a new evil sidekick, and Tubby Mora answered said ad. And of course, he's meeting up with Jack in his lab to do an interview, but in the middle of said interview, Wuya reacts as a new Shengong Wu has revealed itself. In this case, a sword called the Sword of Storms, which has the ability to create giant gale force winds that are essentially like a storm. As such, Jack at first wants to go off and get the Shengong Wu, but Tubby Mora offers to go and get it free of charge as a demonstration of his abilities. In the meantime, back with the Xiaolin monks, they also get a word of the Sword of Storms, and it turns out that Omi has extensive knowledge of this thing and starts expositing what the sword is capable of, but as he's doing this, Raimundo starts trailing off and daydreaming and thus misses the whole speech. And thus by the time it's done, well, he's heard nothing and he just wants to get a move on. Either way, the team eventually makes their way to Monte Carlo, specifically the beach, to try and find the sword, but because this specific Shengong Wu is affecting Dojo to the point where he's actually getting allergies, he can't actually pinpoint exactly where the sword is on the beach, just that it's on the beach. As such, the group decides that they need to split up and cover more ground to find it, though Raimundo, in his attempt to search for the sword, decides he wants to go surfing. However, just before he even gets to the ocean, he ends up tripping on what he thinks is driftwood, but is in reality the sword buried in the sand. So hey, it looks like an easy win. Unfortunately, when he does, that's when he finds it, and that's when Tubby Mora shows up, and what I kind of love is that Raimundo already knows that Tubby Mora's there on Jack's behalf, because apparently the Xiaolin monks saw the ad too, and so Tubby Mora and Raimundo get into a fight. And the thing is, from the outset, we are shown that Raimundo and Tubby Mora are both skilled fighters, as Tubby Mora does actually showcase that he does have great agility despite his great weight, and he can even use his weight to his advantage. But what ultimately causes Raimundo to lose this battle is his choice of weapon. For you see, while the Sword of Storms is indeed a sword, well, it also turns out that a sword is the one thing you can't use it as, because as Raimundo tries getting into a sword fight against Tubby Mora's katana, well, the Sword of Storms just goes right through it like it's made of air, which even confuses Raimundo. As such, this allows Tubby Mora to turn the tables on him, knock him into the sand, and then crush him utilizing his massive girth, which allows him to go in and steal the sword. And when Raimundo recovers and tries to once again duke it out with Tubby Mora to get the sword, again, Tubby Mora once again whoops Raimundo's ass as he used the Sword of Storms to create a sandstorm that buries Raimundo. As such, he gets away with the sword, and by the time the monks find Raimundo, he's long gone, and they're upset that Raimundo just kind of drowned out what Omi said earlier. Either way, bad guys have the sword, and Jack immediately underplays Tubby Moore's capabilities because he wants to see if he can get another freebie out of him, which I kind of like is one of the few times that we see Jack and Wee on the same page, but whatever. Either way, the good guys decide to lick their wounds and go back to the temple, but Raimundo is still salty that he lost the battle. And what I do like is that none of the monks are giving him shit for the loss. All of them, save Clay, have netted losses in the past, though in the case of Clay, he got his ass whooped by Catnape last week, so whatever. So I kind of like that none of them are really holding this over Raimundo's head. But unfortunately, though, while they each they try to make him feel better, in the case of Omi, he tries giving him a pep talk, which he's bad at, and in the case of Kimiko, she offers him to play a game, which he ignores. Ultimately, Raimundo is just not responding to anything. However, Master Fong finally does go up to Raimundo and does kind of get more into why Raimundo is feeling the way he is. Basically, Raimundo thinks that he should have been able to whoop Tubby Mora's ass because he's a more skilled fighter. And while Master Fong doesn't deny that Raimundo is skilled, he tells him that the reason why he lost was because he lacked knowledge. And it's here where Master Fong drops his knowledge on Raimundo. That, as he says, a single drop of knowledge is more valuable than an entire ocean of thought. Which makes sense, because if you want to go into a fight, having pre-knowledge of something can help you in the long run. And in the case of Raimundo, because he didn't know exactly how the Sword of Storms worked, it was what allowed Tubby Moore to turn the tables on him. As such, with that bit of knowledge, Master Phone goes off, to actually play the video game Kimiko was offering earlier, and Raimundo, while a little salty, does take Master Phone's word to heart, and so he ends up staying up all night and studies the Xiaolin scroll to see if he can find anything that can be helpful. However, during the night, Dojo once again reacts. Apparently, another Shen Gong Wu has revealed itself. This one also causing an allergic reaction. In this case, this new Shen Gong Wu is a cloak called the Shroud of Shadows, which gives whoever wears it the ability to turn invisible. Think of it like that disappearing cloak from Harry Potter, whatever that's called. I haven't read or watched Harry Potter. Point is, it's a magic cloak that makes you invisible, and so the Xiaolin monks go to find it. In this case, the search brings them all the way to Tokyo, where they go to a fountain, and sure enough, the Shroud of Shadows is under the water. Unfortunately, though, the bad guys show up, and immediately everyone gets into a tussle as everyone's fighting over the Shroud, which of course ends with two people getting their hands on it. In this case, Raimundo and Tubby Mora. And so, Tubby Mora decides to challenge Raimundo to a Xiaolin showdown. In this case, because they're both in a koi pond, they're both going to stand on two separate stones inside koi pond, and ultimately the loser is whoever gets knocked into the water. And so, however, before Raimundo can accept the challenge, he decides to add a little twist to it, because in his studies of the Xiaolin scroll, well, he actually learned something that's interesting about Xiaolin showdowns. There are apparently variations. Now, we'll see more variations as the series goes along, but the variation that Raimundo learned about is something called a Shen Yi Bu Dare, which, as he puts it, is supposed to be kind of like a double dare. So, you know how for a regular Xiaolin showdown, usually both opponents will wager one Shen Gong Wu each that they both use in the battle? Well, in a Shen Yi Bu Dare, they double up, and both opponents will wager two Shen Gong Wu each. And on top of that, when someone throws up a Shen Yi Bu Dare, they can also make alterations to the showdown. Now, ultimately, the showdown challenge has to still stick by the guidelines of what it's supposed to be. Like in this case, like I said, Tubby Moore said that they are going to stand on separate stones, and the loser is the one that gets knocked into the water. Well, you can add more twists to it, add extra rules on top of the showdown. And in this case, when Raimundo challenges Tubby Moore to a Shen Yi Bu Dare, he also adds the fact that maybe every once in a while, he and Tubby Moore could swap Shen Gong Wu. And as such, Tubby Moore does accept the challenge, with him wagering the Sword of Storms and the Fist of Tebigong, while Raimundo wagers the Eye of Dashi and the Two-Ton Tunic. As such, with all the ground rules put up, a Xiaolin showdown commences, and again, kick-ass effects. Basically, the fountain just turned into a vast ocean, and the stones turned into what look into giant stalagmites. I think those are the ones that come out of the ground. I don't know. Point is, they're now more than just simple stones in the water. They're massive pillars, and it looks like there's a raging storm There's a raging storm all around the area, while the little catfish that were swimming in the pond are now massive, swimming underwater. So yeah, shit just got real. As such, with the yell of Gong Yi Tum Pai, they both start battling. And at first it looks like that Raimundo's putting up a good fight, as the Sword of the Storms doesn't really do anything when Raimundo's armed with the Two-Ton Tunic, but likewise, Raimundo can't knock Tubby Moore off either, because when he tries using the Eye of Dashi, Tubby Moore counters it with the Fist of Tebigong. Unfortunately, this is when the extra rule, the Shen Yi Bu Dare, comes in, as the giant koi fish come out of the water and steal Shen Gong Wu from Tubby Moore and Raimundo, with them taking the Two-Ton Tunic from Raimundo and the Fist of Tebigong from Tubby Moore, giving it to the other opponent. Unfortunately, though, Tubby Moore, once again, without the Two-Ton Tunic, Raimundo's kind of lost a bit of a weight to keep him on his platform, and so Tubby Moore uses the Sword of Storms to try and knock him down, which he succeeds in, but thankfully, Raimundo manages to hold on to the side of his pillar before he gets into the water, so he's not out yet. Unfortunately, then, that's also when the catfish swap Shen Gong Wu again, as he loses the Fist of Tebigong, and Tubby Moore loses the Sword of Storms. And unfortunately, once Raimundo holds the Sword of Storms, it means he now is only holding onto his pillar with one hand. As such, Tubby Moore thinks this is going to be an easy win. He can either drop the sword or just fall into the water. However, turns out this is kind of what Raimundo wanted, as he chooses to fall off his platform, but before he can go into the water, he takes out the Eye of Dashi and then throws it into the hilt of the sword. And it turns out, combining the power of these two Shengang Wu is a match made in heaven. With the lightning powers combined with the Sword of Storm's wind powers, it allows Raimundo to kick up an even bigger storm than before, and actually allows him to literally ride the wind. And as such, he manages to fly right over Tabimora, and because now Raimundo is now one with the wind, thanks to the Shengang Wu, Tabimora can't do anything to hurt him. As such, Raimundo manages to use the power of his Wu to kick up a storm so great that not even the two-ton tunic can withstand it, and thus Tabimora is thrown off his platform into the water, thus losing the showdown, and netting Raimundo all 5 Shengang Wu. So yes, good guys win this one, and everyone cheers Raimundo, while Jack, Spicer, and Muia try to silently make a getaway. As such, the episode ends as the Shengang Wu are now safely back in the vault. Master Feng is impressed that Raimundo was able to challenge was able to throw out a Shen Yi Bu Dare, and by the end, we see Raimundo still studying in the vault, Omi trying to spy on him using the Shroud of Shadows, and only for Raimundo to tell him to get lost, and once he's alone, Raimundo just goes back to playing video games. So that's fun. So anyway, yeah, that was the episode. My thoughts on it. Overall, I find it to be enjoyable. In this case, once again, as these are still with early episodes, this episode actually goes on to develop more of Raimundo's character. And if I can actually go off on a slight tangent here, I kind of want to do a little... I want to talk a bit about last week's episode and something that I kind of missed. Last week's episode also did a good job at showcasing more character development for main characters. In this case, the whole lesson that they were imparting with Omi, realizing that in order to secure a victory, you may need to do something you're not okay with. Actually worked well towards Omi's character development, as in that episode, it kind of showcased that Omi was... After all, as we'd seen in previous episodes, Omi was a very prideful person, and he wanted to use the Tire Claws throughout the episode, and ultimately what he had to do was kind of sacrifice his needs for the greater needs of everybody else, which I think is a good bit of character development on Omi's part, because after all, what we've seen of him in these early episodes, he does seem to be very arrogant. So doing something that was a lot more selfless does show more of development on his part, which before you say he's selfish already, well, I wouldn't say he isn't. He's trying to be a good guy, but you can still be selfish and try and be one of the good guys. Again, it's a nice little bit. But going back towards how this episode furthers character development with Raimundo, it does well in kind of showcasing him actually learning. After all, as we've seen in previous episodes, Raimundo is a slacker. He's a joker. He tends to not take things too seriously. And while we have seen that he does at least want to do his job as a Xiaolin monk actually competently, and he does see the grander picture, well, kind of going back with his arrogant attitude, he tends to overvalue his own capabilities, especially when compared to other people. Similar to Omi, but whereas Omi will throw his experience in your face and assume it'll work, in the case of Raimundo just kind of wears it on his sleeve. And in that regard, it works it's two different forms of arrogance, but whereas Omi will try and teach you because he thinks he's better. Hold on one second. Sorry, dog stuff. But yeah, like I said, while Omi will actively try to teach you because he thinks he knows better, Raimundo is just one to flaunt his skills and assume he'll get the job done. What I kind of like is that this episode sort of throws that attitude in his face, as he kind of went into the situation regarding the Sword of Storms, assuming that all it would take is for him to just kick the right guy's ass, and he'd just walk away without any problem. But because he lacked the necessary knowledge to actually wield the Shengang Wu in question, it caused him to get a loss, and as a result, that's probably why he reacted the way he did afterwards, because he assumed that he would know better, that he should know better, and yet he didn't. He lost to a foe that he thought was inferior to him, and it's all because he was so arrogant about his own capabilities that he didn't bother to learn anything, which I think makes the lesson at the end of the episode that much more poignant, because essentially, in the case of Raimundo, this is about him kind of realizing that maybe he doesn't always have the skills that he thinks he does. And so, to try and actually kind of cover this little facet of him, he tries to actually learning and growing. And he does put in all the necessary effort to try and learn as much as possible. As, yeah, he may have lost the sword, but if he can learn as much, but ultimately, he takes the failure, and he uses it to try and ensure it never happens again, as he studies extensively with the scroll, and in those studies he comes across new knowledge that allows him to turn the tables on his foe in the next battle, as by learning about what a Shen Yi Bu dare is, it allows him to twist the eventual Xiaolin showdown in the episode so that the bad guy gets thrown on their ass. After all, because of the Shen Yi Bu dare, he was able to add extra rules to the showdown, which allowed him to twist the tides of which allowed him to twist the tides into his favor, which in this case netted him the Sword of Storms halfway through the battle, and combining it with the Eye of Dashi, he kicked Tubby Moore's ass. I like that. It's a nice little thing. I like that, and it's a nice little, and it does kind of work well towards what Master Funk said, that a drop of knowledge can be more valuable than a sea of thought, because sometimes knowing the right thing in the right place can help you. If you know the right tricks, then even someone who should be more skilled than you can easily fall flat. It's knowing the right things, which in this case, it's about, I can't believe I'm saying this, it's about studying well. That's kind of, I feel like that's kind of the more base message of it all, like that's the groundwork, and ultimately if you sift through the episode you can probably find a deeper meaning to it, and that's probably what, I'm hoping that's what I'm going to get at, but that's kind of but ultimately that's what I like about that, is that because Raimundo actually took the time to study the environment, study his environment, study study the rules of the Xiaolin Showdown, the Shen Gong Wu, and so forth, it allowed him to strategize a plan based around that knowledge and get a heads up against their opponent, which I like that. It's very nice. It's a nice little way of showing that a little knowledge can go a long way, and I like how they showcase it, as like with other lessons, it did well in not only showcasing the effectiveness of the lesson, but also in furthering the character arc for one of the main characters, in this case Raimundo, the normally arrogant jackass who got knocked down a few pegs and thus had to be humbled in order to learn this lesson. I like that. It's nice and I dig it. And on top of that, the action is fun. Again, it's still fast-paced action, and despite Tubby Moore being a very fat guy, he's actually very capable as a fighter, and even with Raimundo's handicap with the sword early in the episode, it was clear that he was putting up a very good fight against him, and likewise in the eventual Xiaolin showdown, he did show some actual intelligence and effectiveness. He actually was a good counter for Raimundo. So in that regard, it's nice. Plus of course the battle with the Xiaolin monks still kick ass, and the Shen Gong Wu fighting was still awesome. And again, going off the Shen Gong Wu, we learned this episode, they're both pretty alright. The Sword of Storms, I don't know. It's a cool Shen Gong Wu concept, but it loses points for me because it can't be used as a sword. And because I like swords. Swords are cool. And the fact that there is a sword in this episode that actually does look pretty damn cool, but can't actually be used as a sword, does annoy me a little. But likewise, the Shroud of Shadows is a nice little way of countering that, as it's at least a very mysterious Shen Gong Wu, since it can make anyone who wears it invisible. So, again, dig that. It's nice. I like it. But if I have to list another thing with the episode, I suppose I should probably talk about Tubby Moore as a villain. And like I said, I do kind of like him more than Cat Nappe from last episode. Now, but at the same time, I don't really know how to classify Tubby Moore among all the characters we've seen. Like I said, he's an overweight ninja, and while I wouldn't go as far as to say the episode does anything to make fun of him in any regard, as they do show him to be a very capable fighter and can actually hold his own against the Xiaolin monks, and able to use both his ninja skills and his girth to his advantage in battle, there are like some light jokes that are made to try and make fun of the fact that he's fat. Again, you can sometimes hear occasional farting noises when he walks. Sometimes he wobbles a little. He has to pull up his pants when he's walking. Or in the case of when he was fighting Raimundo, he literally just did a belly flop right on top of him just to get the sword. So there is still some humor in there. Maybe it's a little mean-spirited, but at the same time, Tubby Moore is actually shown to be a very capable fighter, so I think I'll let it slide. And in that regard, I think what makes it work is that Tubby Moore is, like I said, shown to be actually intelligent. Yeah, he can seem a little meek when he was interviewing against Jack Spicer, but to be fair, he was applying for a job. I feel like anyone would be meek in his position. And likewise, when he actually was on the job, he was not incompetent. He took it seriously, and he used his skills to their fullest effect in the best way possible. So I think he's an alright villain of the week. I still think he's better than Katnape. Again, Katnape is not awful, but she kind of loses points for me for how fickle her personality was, which I guess kind of makes sense considering that she's based on cats, but whatever. Point is, I like him more. Point is, I like him more. But at the end of the day, the episode Shen Yi Bu, I think, is a good episode. Which, actually, kind of another thing, it expands more on the lore of the Xiaolin Showdown, because again, this is where we start seeing variations of Xiaolin Showdowns, and like I said, we are going to be seeing more variations on them in the series. Now, ultimately, it still kind of boils down to a similar thing: one side versus the other over Shen Gong Wu. But it at the very least it's a nice way of showing that there are variants on it that can expand as everything goes along. Likewise in here, as we saw here with when Raimundo called a Shen Yi Bu dare, they doubled up on Shen Gong Wu. And he was able to add an extra stipulation to winning the showdown, which in this case was him saying that every now and again he and Tubby Morris swapped Shen Gong Wu. It's a nice little thing, and it actually does make you more curious about future Xiaolin showdowns, because if there's this little stipulation in the scroll that says about how Xiaolin showdown can be done, then maybe there are other rules, maybe other variations, other ways of the story that the battles can go down, and I like seeing that. I like seeing that explored. So on the whole, I do like it. It's kind of nice. It's nice. So yeah, on the whole, Shen Yi Bu is a good episode. Had an alright villain of the week. The Shen Gong Wu displayed were nice. It furthered Raimundo's character development. It does some world building with Shaolin Showdown. And likewise, I think the lesson is a pretty good lesson to learn. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week where the bad guys kind of get a very big win. You'll see when we get there. But till then, I hope you have a good night, and take care.